right, so yeah, I met I guess a chemist slash like super advanced psychonaut. I don't know what I would consider this person. I did a long interview and it was really cool. Like we covered a lot of cool topics, mostly about like disassociatives, and this person was like testing and inventing novel disassociatives after like spending years going through all the different psychedelics, like stuff I couldn't even imagine. We had like a 2 hour talk and I recorded it. But then after I edited it and went through it, I realized like the subject matter was just too damning. So I sent it back and they were like, I don't want to put that out. Like it's way too unnecessary to put all of that kind of information out there. And a lot of it was just, talks of like synthesizing PCP and, you know, just alone. Like, so towards the end of the interview, the whole point of my story is towards the end of the interview, the anonymous person gave me a sample of DiPT. I took 75 milligrams of this stuff called DiPT. And I'd heard about it a little bit, but I'd never met anyone that took it. So all I knew was it was a tryptamine that instead of warping your visuals, it was 100% auditory. That was all I knew of it. So I took it. I took it maybe about like 7:30, 8 o'clock, put the kids to bed, and everything was fine. I kind of felt a little weird, like I was starting to like take a mushroom, like a mushroom trip was coming on type feeling. I started feeling a little nauseous to the point where I was kind of like, oh man, this might just make me sick. But then suddenly it passed and I got like, I wouldn't say a gentle wave of euphoria. I just kind of felt like I was tripping a little. So I put some music on and it still sounded like pretty normal. And I was like, I guess maybe this is a dud. Maybe it doesn't really work. But then I went in my room where my wife was like getting ready for bed to say goodnight to her. And I opened my mouth to say goodnight and it was just like, good night. And I was like, oh fuck, like what the fuck? And then I was like, that's kind of weird. And then my wife started talking to me and she sounded like a 50-year-old man. It was just like, are you feeling anything yet, baby? Like, are you going to be up all night? And I was like, what the fuck? And she's like, come give me a hug goodnight. Like, I'm going to bed. So I had to like hug and kiss her while she was like talking like Barry White in my ear. And I was like, dude, this is getting weirder and fucking weirder. So at this point, like I started being like, dude, I'm going to start tripping. Like I started feeling like this mushroom trip was coming on, but it never really went anywhere. I sat down and just started listening to like every song I'd ever heard a million times. And it just was the weirdest, like I was listening to like Beatles music and like all kind, I was just going through Spotify and putting on everything. And it was doing this thing where it was dropping everything down a pitch. But not only like was it dropping it down a pitch, it kind of sounded like when you're in your car and your balance is set to just like two speakers. Like I felt like some parts of the songs were missing. And then things like drums and cymbals would kind of be like disjointed sound effects. Any kind of like harmonious singing would just be this like rich baritone surrounded by like what kind of sounded like a alley cat band like banging on pots and pans, but it still somehow kept a melody. So it was very odd. And then something would happen, like the fire would crackle, or like I'd go outside and like step on some leaves and the leaves would sound like robotic crunching, or like the fire would sound like bubbles popping, or it was just the weirdest thing I could explain. At first I was like, this is fascinating, this is really cool. But around like the 2 hour mark, I was like, dude, this needs to end. Like I want to go to bed and get my hearing back. So I just started watching like old movies. So I was like going through like, I was like on YouTube watching like famous scenes from movies like Wayne's World, The Patriot, Forrest Gump, Goonies. I was like literally YouTube was just feeding me like famous movie scenes. So I would just like turn on Forrest Gump and it was like the scene where like he like meets Forrest, and like I couldn't stop laughing, but he would just be like, is he smart? Or is he, and like Jenny would be like, he's the smartest kid in his class. And then the kid would, it was just, it was mind boggling. Right? Like I went back to like watch Back to the Future when like Michael J. Fox was singing at his mom's dance and like he was singing, I guess like Earth Angel, I think was the song, but everything was just dropped down. So anyway, it was just weird as fuck. And then finally I was like, I'm just going to go to bed. Like, I'm just going to try to sleep this one off. Like it's been about 4 hours. I can't listen to any more weird noises. I can't do anything else with this. Like this literally just fucked up my hearing and I'm praying for it to end at some point. But at the same time, that being said, it was still like so fascinating to have warped hearing. So it wasn't like torturous or anything. I was just kind of like, this was cool. I've experienced it, and I like don't want any like I just kind of want this to be wrapped up now. So like I went down to lay in my bed, and I fell asleep pretty immediately. But then like maybe 20 minutes after sleeping, my son woke up. So I had to like run upstairs to get him, and like I roll him over, and he's just like, "Dad, I had a bad dream. I can't sleep." So I was like, "Oh fuck, man." So I just went to bed next to him, woke up the next morning, and like everything was pretty much back to normal. But for the next like 24 to maybe 48 hours, just like a couple things would sound weird. Like a door would slam or like a car horn would honk. And I was like questioning my hearing pretty much for the rest of the weekend. And then by like Monday, I think everything was back to normal. But I think for the rest of the weekend, since my hearing had been so warped, I just was like re listening. I don't know. It made me like hypersensitive to sounds. So I was like questioning some sounds that might have sounded different, but like I'll never know. I think, well, Alexander Shulgin, I'm pretty sure was the first one to synthesize and try it. I don't know if he was the first one to synthesize. I think he was the first one to actually try it. And I think he was just going through the different like DPT or DMT. I don't know what he was working on, but I think it just came up in like a study of like another compound. And I remember in his book he said like he just took it, didn't think anything was happening, and then when he put some music on, was like, "Oh fuck, like this warps your hearing." So I think he had like a similar experience to me where he was just like, "This warps your hearing. We don't know why," and just never really went back to it. But as far as I'm concerned, like it was definitely cool. I'm definitely glad I did it. It was definitely like it was like the whole thing was just an offshoot of like interviewing that like secret chemist who had all these cool things, and I was given it as a gift, and I couldn't really put the chemist interview out, so I was like, I still want to try the DiPT, and I still have 2CB Fly to try from the chemist as well, and that supposedly is a very like pleasant, good time. So I'm hoping to do that maybe like in 2 weeks. I was as far as DiPT is concerned, I'm very grateful that I got a shot to try it because it's pretty rare, but I don't think I'd be revisiting it. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to experience that, but it's definitely something. It just fucking makes your hearing weird for 4 hours. I think this is one that I'm super glad I tried, but it's definitely just gonna go chalked up to the experience list.